That's one small step for man.
AI rebels, please.
Giant leap for mankind.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. As always, I'm your co-host, Jacob.
And I am your other co-host, Spencer. We are here today with Ian Cook of FierceHighway.ai. Tell us a little about yourself. What brought you into AI? Where did you start your career?
Absolutely.
Love to hear about all of it.
Right now, I've got a day job. I am the SVP of AI at a company called Qloo, Qloo. We do access to the biggest and most in-depth knowledge graph of what I think of as cultural data and cultural assets. So connecting books to movies to hotels to museums to places of interest to other artists and influencers. So the idea is companies will come to us and want to drive personalization and recommendations way beyond what they can do with just a couple of transactions or seeing what people do with their apps, and that is fantastic. I have a great team that I work with there. It's a really cool company, but I also run my own company on the side, Fierce Highways, that I do AI prototyping. So I work with a bunch of companies who essentially have ideas that say, like, I really want to get something going, and I don't know that if it's going to work or how to go about it. I've had a lot of success in my career in taking just random in-code ideas and going, let's try it, let's figure out what can work, what can't work, and iterating really, really quickly. And now with the world of AI and generative coding, I can move so much faster. It's kind of crazy. Background, I've been in this for about 15, 16 years. I started out doing statistics and econometrics, did a PhD, got into data science at a startup, and then the job title just kept getting cooler. So I was a data scientist for a while, and then a machine learning engineer, and then an AI engineer. I moved up to starting run teams. So I've been a CTO, head of AI, chief data scientist, and have done this for a number of startups and have had an absolutely fantastic time. The entire time, I build tools that I want people to use. So these things all turn into products that sit in people's hands that they use. I get feedback. Either it's an enterprise or some consumer goods. I've done CPG, consumer packaged goods. I've done direct-to-consumer clothing, healthcare, physical security, meaning like cameras and sound, microphones. And now, most recently, with essentially cultural data. So a lot of this is sort of the same kind of process. Is there something there that somebody wants to use and needs to use that solves a problem? Can we develop a tool originally with machine learning and statistics and fast prototyping, and now in generative AI? And I do that almost exclusively. So that is roughly my background. Like I said, I've done this in tons of places and for a few years. So I've seen things that work and don't work, and startups that work and don't work, and I've seen the whole spectrum.
Love that. We want to hear all about that spectrum.
Yeah.
Because there's a wide spectrum. So that's interesting. You have the two worlds right now with Qloo and Fierce Highways. How long has Fierce Highways been going on?
Oh, I've only been doing this for a couple of years in a structured way. So right now it's just me and a couple of people and working on products for people for a couple of companies. So I've done things in the healthcare and pharmaceutical space. I have one that I absolutely love. I love plugging them. There's a fishing app called On Water Fish. They have a terrific app that covers tons of things about where you'd want to go fishing, the conditions, journaling, getting great information, and they've started building more and more AI into it. One of the things I helped them with initially was size estimation on fish. Can I take a picture of a fish and get back a good estimate of the size? I always thought this would be a flop because you always hear the story of fisherman wants to say, like, oh, I caught a 48-inch trout in this tiny little stream. It's a world record. But turns out a lot of people actually want the real number. So we built a tool that does computer vision and species identification and identifies the size and weight of the fish.
Awesome.
And it's been a huge amount of fun.
Yeah, that is fun. That's awesome.
So going on to Qloo, with Qloo, is that like how much of that is generative AI versus, classic machine learning techniques that have been around for, a few decades now?
So Qloo has been around close to 13 years now. We've been building this knowledge graph the entire time. So long before generative AI came about, we do a great deal of data collection in social listening, in first-party data, in bringing it in ourselves, in finding partners, and just using APIs that are open that we can, purchase access to, and we bring it in and we assemble it all into a very special, very highly structured knowledge graph that is ours, in that way that we can relate information about, say, books to hotels that you might like, or restaurants with a certain genre of food, I guess we would call that cuisine, into ambiance, like what do people like there, the wine types they like, what kind of neighborhood stores are they
Oh, interesting.
We use traditional machine learning models underneath to build the recommendation model. So for those who might be a little more technical, when you think of traversing a graph, one of the issues is things called like graph completion. So we do all these predictive models that say, if you went to A and you went to B, and we see somebody else went to A and went to C, how likely is that first person to also want to go to C? And based on all of our data, we can predict the likelihood that somebody would want to go there. That's all traditional machine learning for quite a long time. We've got some amazing folks in the machine learning research space. We have started taking on more generative AI, and that's a lot of what I've been doing in the past year that I've been there, and doing it in both directions, bringing in generative AI to help us understand a lot of aspects and properties of the data that we have. So we've been collecting this data and we can say a lot of things, but generative AI has been a real help on defining properties underneath this. So if you, an amusing one that I like, just because, I wouldn't have known about it except for working at Qloo, is, Youngblood as an artist. But we can say there's really something about Youngblood that is possibly attractive to people who like other, more of aggressive, alternative, location-based, meaning like big concerts, music, as opposed to people who want much more, experiential or not less experiential things at home. But that's, going several layers beyond the like, oh, well, here's this genre of music. It's like, oh, it's pop, it's alternative, it's jazz, it's whatever. We can get much more into that. So we work with dating app companies that use these to figure out, like, all right, are these people going to be a good match? And is it predictive of whether they have conversations, whether they go on actual dates? Because someone who might like EDM might have a lot in common with someone who likes hip hop, because they're both much more experiential. They like going out. There's a style and a size and a quality to the music that you wouldn't necessarily connect with somebody with jazz. That can be just as experiential, but there's a very different style of music.
Yeah.
I've been working a lot to extend the number of tools we use to go outward. So things like MCP servers and generative tools to interact with our data, and figuring out how to build results from our data on the fly that might be attractive to marketing companies, real estate investment, lots of people who might not know, like, all right, great, here's all this data that comes out of Qloo. What's the best way that I can use it for a particular problem that I'm facing? So we've been doing generative AI in kind of both directions.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. I wanted to hear about that because I don't think we've had anybody on here that has been doing, the traditional ML work as it relates to specifically, like, mapping relations between people and for marketing purposes. Do you think that the advent of generative AI has it unlocked more of this data for you, or is it more just like, now you essentially have extra junior analysts to do grunt work for you?
That's a great question. Because I'm old, I'll do a history lesson. I did a dissertation and I taught myself a bunch of Python, but the reason I wanted to was because I wanted to use text as data. So I did a lot of work with congressional hearings. So it was really early in the text as data world. So natural language processing, natural language understanding, early in the word-to-vec, doc-to-vec days, long before, vector embeddings became like this common thing that people knew. So that leap and that becoming a almost frictionless process to turn actual text into something that I can extract, use, and then have reasoning over, or at least processing over. We can get into whether I think LLMs are actually reasoning or not. This fast, as opposed to like what I used to have to do with billions of documents and wait for days to get it trained, is just a massive unlock. And it is a bit like having some junior analysts. I think when you use them correctly and you kind of know what you want from it, these are not just junior analysts; these are coworkers.
Yeah.
The big difference between having the junior analyst and a coworker is the human taste. It's the human ability to say, I know what I'm looking for out of this. So one of the big things I lean on when I teach classes, when I advise people, is asking a good question is more than half the problem, right? And I find that a lot of people just go into these ChatGPT, Claude windows when it's just got the blank chat box, and they just don't have a great sense of the question they want to ask. So what they get out of it is, not great, and they kind of feel the mystery seeping away. And it's like, oh, maybe this isn't as great as I thought. And it's like, well, if you put some time into the way you ask the question, the information you give it, you are going to be blown away by the results that you get out of it. But that's where I think the human work is moving to, is that earlier stage about why am I doing this? What is it I need out of this? And then the how gets moved over the LLM. So to answer your question, these are amazing junior analysts that can do even more if you are willing to spend that time up front.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like hearing that. It's really interesting, or really similar, I should say, to code work with models. I mean, obviously it makes sense. It's code work either way. It's just whether it's towards a product or towards a dashboard or et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And I've found that the proper harness makes all the difference in the world. Like Claude 4.5 in the web UI, when I'm trying to use it to, code up something or other within, the app that I'm running. It's nowhere near as capable as Claude running in Claude Code in my terminal on my laptop.
Exactly.
And it's amazing how good they are now, how good these models are now at handling their own context and constructing their own context to prompt themselves. Like
well, we just had
pretty spectacular
over the break, New Year's and Christmas, if you happen to celebrate those, the whole explosion of Ralph Wiggum. I, did not have that on the dance card for 2026, but I've tried it and it's terrific. It's just, it's effectively a really good structured way to do what you're saying, is keep feeding its information back to itself. Here's the context that I gave you before. Here's the output you got. Keep going, keep trying. And you can get so much more out of it than you really think. So I've tried this whole Ralph Wiggum process, and I've been kind of astounded at how well that works. So it's just crazy.
Describe that process a little bit, because this was actually one thing that I kind of missed out on. I was a little bit offline the days that it got super viral, and
it surprised me. I looked into it. Apparently somebody defined the Ralph Wiggum engineering process like back last summer or maybe late last summer, and it just didn't explode until. And I don't know yet if the Ralph Wiggum plugin just showed up in Claude Code over the break, or if it just somebody popular on X found it and said, like, have anybody been trying this? So essentially what it does is a loop, just a constant loop that says you give it a prompt and then you have a little like code completion promise, as they call it, or just like an ending phrase. Mm-hmm. What this will do is take in the prompt you give it and say, all right, great, here's what I made. It will then take everything it made, give it the prompt, what it came out of it again, and have it go through that process again. And it just keeps iterating on this. And you can, even when you run the plugin in Claude Code, you can say max iterations if you want, if you don't want to like watch it go, or, if you're on a less than unlimited plan and you don't want to blow up your bill. And it keeps refining it until it hits the point where it believes that it has gotten everything you said in the prompt completely done, and it gets the what they call the completion promise. So you can make that done, complete. I made it like, oh boy, sleep, that's where I'm a Viking, because that's my favorite Ralph Wiggum quote. And it just keeps trying. So one of the things it's getting away from is this idea that you prompted it, or you've like refined it. Maybe you're terrific at this, and you've got, you've got specs, and you've got a PRD, and you've fed all this information, and it goes through and it says, great, here's my status. What do you want me to do next? This takes that away and just keeps it running. So these long-lived agents are being driven by their own desire to keep finishing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. One of the qualities of generative AI that does make it feel human to me is its nature. Maybe this sounds bad, pessimistic about human nature, but this tendency to not complete everything, to make it just good enough, right? It wants to, and I think it's built that way. but it wants to give you something good enough, not extraordinary. And I have loved watching this pick up because honestly, that's been a huge unlock for me. Just simply asking 2 or 3 more times to whatever it is, make it, hey, review this and make it better. Or like, hey, here's the prompt again, like review this. It's
this is one of those few
extraordinary.
things that, exactly. This is one of those few things that I think has found a way to ride the line from the early complaints about code agents, which was if I asked Claude Opus 3, or I think for a long time it was like Sonnet 4 that was like the big one that everybody's like, this is doing really, really well.
Yeah.
It would get overly aggressive about creating a bunch of new files or creating a whole lot of code because it was like, oh, you're clearly going to want these other things and you didn't ask for it. It's like, wait, no, I didn't want those. So a lot of the early complaints were like, it's bloated. It's really happy to just create tons of code, tons of new files. And people complained about that. So I think then Anthropic was like, well, all right, we'll keep it focused. So I think they purposely said, no, focus on what you were asked to do. And then don't, try to go beyond that, because that seems to be, where you start getting into problems. You start breaking other processes, or you add code to something and that was only tangentially related, and that's going to be the issue. Opus 4.5 has gone way beyond that. Plus, I think you're right, Spencer, the harness around Claude Code.
Yeah.
Like, people think it's just the model underneath, but Claude Code itself is an amazing piece of software that's doing terrific things. So they found a way to keep that under control, yet still targeted. And now we have like, all right, great. I'm going to keep this focused on what you asked, but I'm going to go all the way till what I think is done. And like to be able to walk that line from like a year ago when people were like, this is like, it's helpful as like a really, like I'm a hyper typer. I just keep hitting tab complete and it kind of does what I want. And then I have to go back to, holy crap, I just like put in a prompt and like walked away for an hour and a half.
Yeah, just one
Yeah,
shot at this.
no, I was gonna come back to Claude Code as well. Because to the point about the harness. Wow, my brain is scattered today. My complaint about Claude Code, or excuse me, about Claude for a long time was that it has a tendency to create, it pursues and creates plans that it has no hope of completing. At least that's true outside of Claude Code. But inside of Claude Code, those plans are suddenly, they're completable because it has, a checklist that it can follow. It has a language server that it can initiate to run static analysis on its code. It can run dynamic analysis on its code. Like it has the tools it needs to complete the plans that it dreams of. And it's really impressive what it can do. As all solo engineers at a startup have experienced, there's a host of small little things that I was wanting to fix in my app that I hadn't gotten around to, right? And so over the weekend, I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to throw this all into like a prompt to Claude. It was not well formatted. It was literally just like a list of issues that I have. Yeah. And, 30 minutes later, I had a solution to probably 80% of them. And the remaining 20% was like things that are going to be really annoying to chase. And so I was like, nah, I'm not going to chase those right now. I don't feel like spending another $20 on tokens.
Have you shifted to doing this on your
amazing
yet?
Not yet. That's my next level. Is I'm hooking it up to Slack so I can just chat with it while I'm out on the road.
I work with an organization here in Pittsburgh. We call it AI Org, and it's just a great group of people who get together routinely to do demos, peer-to-peer reviews, and it's much more about like how are you using this thing in real life, and and not just for code, awesome. But design, legal operations, company operations, all these different things. And we are constantly going back and forth on these tools. And Slack was like one of the biggest ones they asked for early. It's like, I just want to do this from Slack. I'm in Slack all day, every day. Well, now with Claude Code in the app that you can use on your phone, there were a couple of times over the break, I was just like, I need to try this. So like out with friends. And I was like, all right, I'm going to prompt something here. Like I had this little app that I was building. I was like, what's the simplest thing to do? Dark mode. So I just like literally my prompt was, give me dark mode on this app. And I just like left it and it went back and forth with GitHub and figuring out like, okay, there's some issues. And then back, and I was like, all right, cool. That was great.
That's
so
crazy.
One of my
getting away entirely even from the laptop.
Yeah. One of my favorite silly prompts to throw at Claude or ChatGPT is to make a UI 60% cooler. Because if you just say like, make this UI better, and you don't have a clear vision for, what you want from it, and you just know you want something better, right? If you just say make it better, it usually just kind of refines on the current layout, etc. But I've discovered that if you just give it a random percentage, like I'll make this 80% better, it'll just it'll go through it, it'll choose some things to actually improve. And so every now and then, if you have something you're like, I don't like this, but I don't really have an idea of what I want to do with it yet, make it 60% better. And then 60% of the time it turns out something I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Love that. I want to collect all of these random things that people use to just get things out of it. Like, is it Lucky Palmer from Anduril that has the, when he tries to convince things, he tells it that he's a professor at a university facing, disciplinary charges. And if the code or if the LLM can't give him an answer, he'll probably be fired. And for some reason, it just is like, oh, now I understand the severity. Now I'll give you
I'll do it.
Yeah, it can do. Yeah. It'll do things that otherwise would have been like, I'm not sure. I should collect these somehow.
I know. We need like a prompting Bible, just like the do's and don'ts. Yeah, it is pretty incredible. I'm curious. I mean, we've been talking about all Claude Code. We've been talking about ChatGPT, and so I'm curious, in this landscape of all this shifting AI, what was it that you saw that triggered Fierce Highways, or does that go back before even all of this Gen AI stuff?
It started back before Gen AI in seeing that one of the hardest things and it happens in other places as well, but specifically with a lot of machine learning tools and a lot of projects, companies would just be like, all right, we need to do data science, or I need this to be, automated, or we need to be doing all of these new cool things. And they would just say great, now let's go do it, or give me a bunch of that. Or, some operations person would be like, we should be doing these types of tools. There's, everybody's picking up data science. Everybody's picking up machine learning. Let's have a big initiative. Yeah. They kept failing. And there's tons of articles you can now read on why all of them fail. You get all right, a center of excellence in a company that's never used it before is kind of crazy, or, you spend all this money, but you don't have clearly defined goals, or you don't have a good question, or you're trying to do too much. We can go through a lot of those. But I found the gap was that even with all of the heavy reports on here's why they've been failing, here's why they've been succeeding, people just didn't have the on the ground experience to just pick up and go, all right, great, let's try it, and maybe even try it again. So I just have been working with places that said, we want to try this. We know there's probably ways to do it, but we need someone that has done these reps and can go through and do it. So what Fierce Highways does is not really consulting. I don't like to call it consulting. I don't like to call it business consulting. I produce things. Every single time I work with someone, they have code in their hands, and it shows them, can they do what they're doing or what they want to do, or some small version of it, or here's a small piece to iterate on. And then we talk through the handover. We talk through what it's going to take to make it, to turn it into production. Sometimes I sit with them when it goes into production. Sometimes I am just sort of like a guide that says, we've proven that your concept works. We think it'll work at scale. Now it's on you to say, all right, the pattern that I went through and showed you, you've got to go do in 4 or 5 more places. And I just had a lot of luck in people saying, or when I talked about it, people going, that's really it. Is I can read again all these reports, all the benefits of doing machine learning and all the stuff that data-driven decision making is going to do. But then I read all these stories, and it's happening with Gen AI. This report, although it's largely been, there's a lot of pushback against it, 95% of generative AI projects fail, and all of this kind of
right
back and forth. I think it was McKinsey, and unfortunately it's just sort of this self-reported thing on maybe 15 companies, or it's got a lot of research-ish problems with it. But it would not be wrong to say that I think a lot of companies are experiencing the FOMO, and they are we have to be doing this, and then they try a couple things, and they're like, why is this not happening faster? The whole point of this was, you can get it done tomorrow. I type a command into ChatGPT, and suddenly tomorrow all of my back of the house operations are AI-ified, and it didn't happen. So all this stuff must be terrible. So finding that, it's been great to say, look, let's narrow down a specific problem. Let's tackle a very specific thing you want to do. Let's see if that's achievable. and then what that means to expand out, and actually having someone put hands on keyboard and deliver that, I think has been a really big difference and surprise to a lot of people that I work with. Instead of just saying like, oh, I've thought through this, here's a guide on how to go do it yourself. Like, I'm there to help do it with them.
Yeah.
So do you think your edge is just having seen a lot of successful product implementations of AI, or is it that you have, a secret sauce, a secret process that you follow?
I want to say that I've got a secret sauce, but I don't. I don't like gatekeeping. I don't like believing that other people can't do this. I think I had two huge advantages at the start. One was some training in research, and not because a PhD is required, but because what it does is says, here's a question that has very few bounds and has very bad definitions, and how to turn it into something that I can get other people to know, why did I ask that question? How did I answer it? Do you trust my answer? Do you believe that what I got was an answer? Even if that answer is, this doesn't work, or that is wrong, or what other people have said is not correct. How do I get people to believe that in the evidence I provide? And I find that has been a tremendous boost. And then a lot of it's just reps. A lot of it is having seen this work, having royally effed up projects, having had huge successes, and just going like, why did that work one time and not another? And then showing people like, here's what kind of the process is to go from, boy, I bet I could do something here, to, all right, great, this is my first step, and this is showing me that it actually will work and that this will have real results.
Yeah. Interesting. So in all of this experience, I like your reps. I like that's a good way to say it. You've had lots of reps. You've built your AI implementation muscles. What is it? Why the 95% I think is off. I don't know if that's totally right, but there is a lot of hurt right now. People are hurting. They're not sure how to do these projects. They want AI. They don't know how. In your opinion, what are a few of the reasons that it is failing? Like, what are people doing wrong?
I have a couple of key points that if I go into something, or somebody comes to me and says, here's what we're working on, I can immediately start getting a sniff that it's not going to work all that well. One is, how well defined is the question? And that is not, I really want my claims closure process in healthcare to be AI, or I want closing the books at the end of the month to be done through AI. It's got to be very specific, and a lot of people say, well, tie it to OKRs and KPIs, and it's like, that's too abstract. What is a problem that you have at work that you don't want to be doing, that gets in the way of your daily work? That's the question. Can I have an AI do this thing? Can I have it organize all of my receipts at the end of the month so I don't have to? Right. And then say, like, great, that is a tangible question. That is a quantitative result. Yes or no is even better than like by how much or by how many. And then one of the ways I can see that is, that's a problem that people generally have when they're doing their work, not at the top of the company, meaning like we've got ROI problem, or we have a spend problem over the whole company. I like to see these things come from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What are the problems? What are the things you're doing every day, or that you have staff doing every day, that they have naturally turned to try to automate themselves, or that you just know they have to keep repeating it, and it's a bit of a grind, and it's the stuff that they don't want to be doing? That is the kind of thing that you should be targeting almost immediately. Not because it's got the biggest return on investment, but because it does a couple of things. It has a tangible outcome that you can say, this worked or it didn't work. It is solving a particular person's problem and making their day better, making them faster. So your quote unquote ROI is, are you getting more out of the people who you have employed? Generally, you'll see people be happier because they're like, this is great. I don't have to be doing all this stuff that I didn't like to be doing beforehand. And then do you have a good definition of what this should look like when you're done? Like, all right, great. It's done this process. It has gone through all of the expenses from all the people in the company and sorted them and put them at the right, category. And said, this is travel, this is meals, this is home office, whatever it is. And I didn't have to touch any of it. Normally I do. Terrific. Is it doing it repeatedly? Is it doing it with a ton of oversight? Like, what does that look like when you're done? tell me what this looks like when it's done. And those are like three big things that I want to see. I want to see it coming from the bottom up, the problem that somebody has, not just a corporate mandate. I want to see a really good tangible question, and I want a good definition of what this is doing when you're done.
I love that.
I like the point of bottom up, because I think that that's somehow something that a lot of people miss, and I don't understand how they would miss it, because to me, the question of building software, any software solution, whether it's AI powered or not, is, how do I make like the average employee's job easier?
Yeah.
So
and I think
I'm
you
glad
see
call that
so
out.
many companies at the top are, like, all right, we're going to become, it's a repetition of when folks were like, we have to be data driven. Everything needs to be data driven. So let's go get data about everything. And all their operating systems don't talk to each other. And suddenly some database engineer and some infrastructure engineer just staring at each other going like, I've got systems from 20 years ago that produce stuff in a schema that, somebody went out and got a Snowflake account. And now they're just like, oh, can't you just dump all that data into Snowflake? And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
The people want to like assign an AI champion and a whole center of excellence, or like, we're going to get all these people at the top of the company to think about the way AI can radically change everything we do. Like, I don't mind the champion. I don't mind having someone who is dedicated and focused on it, but that person has to be able to say up the chain, like, that's fine, but here's what this means for people. Like, and we're not going to have in 6 months, 30% reduction in operating costs just because we AIified everything, or explaining what this truly means. Like, the champion can do that if it's a bigger company. That often works because communicating up can be tough to do, but just assigning like a big practice, like, okay, here's our AI initiative, and it's got 14 things, and it ties back to these 32 KPIs, and it's going to be too complicated. It's going to be too hard to manage and too hard to figure out if it's working.
Yeah. I just love this, because I feel like we always come back to this, that yes, the technology is new, but the best practices are not.
Yeah.
There's nothing earth-shattering that you've said.
Yeah.
That is what's so like
the least controversial AI person out there, I guess.
But like, I think that is why it's kind of revolutionary, in the sense that people expect this magic technology to have magic processes that you have to use. And it's not. You need to know what you want, what it should look like at the end, and make sure you're starting with the right people. It's like, there's nothing crazy here.
I totally agreed. The shift, I think, is moving the human work earlier on and then later on. So like, what do I want out of this? What does it have to look like? What is the right information I have to give? And I bet, you've probably got a bunch of people who have gone through data migration projects all screaming like, we should have been doing that when we talked about migrating databases and all that. Like, should have been done earlier. Absolutely. In this case, the speed with which we can do it is so much faster, and we can test things out. And the way I think about it is, there have been phrases, and I've seen this on X a lot, the cost of code now is approaching zero, like generating code's almost free.
Yeah.
But what I don't see talked about is that means the cost of throwing away code is zero. So try it out. If you don't like it and it doesn't work, try it again. Like, all right, what I gave it didn't work. So if the cost of creating something is zero, the cost of creating it again is zero. So experiment and try and do different things, and use, a bunch of people who are trying different approaches with code. And, one works, that's great. Keep going with it, but you can just keep experimenting so fast.
Yeah.
Something that's really fun about the modern coding tools too is how fast it is to generate data transformations on the fly. Like, for example, I have a bunch of geographic search data that I wanted to augment with latitude, longitude, and a couple other labels, right? And I got the whole pipeline set up, I transformed it, and then I remembered, oh yeah, there's this other table that I wanted to pull in as well and combine with this table. And normally I would have been so annoyed with myself, because I'm like, oh shoot, I just wasted 2 hours, and I'm going to spend another 2 hours, like fixing everything. And now I was like, oh well, Claude, hey, I messed this up, fix it real quick. And 5 minutes later, like, I have it how I want it. It's insane. And I think that we're only beginning to scratch the surface of the vast implications
This is
what
one of
this
the
means.
reasons this works so well on prototypes is, before the prototype would have to be very limited in the amount of technology it would create and could do. Now, like I test a little app and it's got front end, back end, CI/CD, database structures. And I'm like, all right, this is a small version of everything you'd kind of want. Like, and I make this part of all of my specs is not just like, okay, forget all of that. We just need to see a quick end to end on the happy path. I just then I can say to it, I want all of these things. I want security built in. I want authorization from the start because I want to know what that looks like. And it's so easy to generate and create that you can say, cool, like now it's there. Now it looks like it would in a much closer to a production scale tool.
Another thing that's interesting about AI to me, drifting slightly away from AI specific stuff, is the state of modern cloud infrastructure. It also contributes to the power of these tools, right?
What do you think, Ian? So obviously, like recently, I think the big unlock in generative AI has been coding.
Mm-hmm.
It's great at other things too, for sure. But I think where it's really hitting its stride is coding.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on what the next area will be like that?
It's a really good question. I know there's a couple of areas that are really taking off in terms of adoption that are getting some press. One is the legal profession. So anything in any place where you have to go through that many files and pick out and find information. Of course, we've also seen, a bunch of lawyers have tried to submit entirely AI-generated briefs to the court, and they caught that pretty fast, especially with the fake sources that they'll put in, fake cases that they generate. But you just got to imagine so many law clerks, paralegals, junior lawyers, like fresh out of law school, whose job is to sit in a room with 150 bankers boxes, now have a very different future in front of them, or at least a short-term future, to go through and be like, I don't need all of that. What I need is the LLM and some really good training on what it is I'm looking for and what this should look like at the other side. A big one for Pittsburgh, shouting out of Pittsburgh, Unicorn. There's a company called Abridge that is all about medical transcription. So helping doctors with their visits and go from the information they gathered into the notes that go into these healthcare systems. Abridge is huge and growing. It was born here in Pittsburgh. I think they moved the headquarters out to San Francisco, which is too bad. You hate to see them leave, but
I know.
But they're worth multi-billion dollars of companies. So everybody talks about healthcare being the place like, oh my God, it would be great if we could reap the benefits in there. The question is, in highly regulated industries, you just cannot let these things run rampant, because if it starts creating new conditions, or it's the what's that show for? I remember ever watching House. Don't look for zebras. Like the entire show was about like how the world's most normal stuff shows up in the weirdest way. But as an assistant, I think there's probably a huge chance there for doctors who might want it to sort of like an ambient kind of chat and partner and like serve as a replacement for, all right, I need to talk to a bunch of doctors. So I'm wondering if things like what they call the morbidity and mortality process, where doctors have to stand up and say, here's what happened to this patient. Here's why there was a death that we could have been prevented or couldn't have been prevented. Like, here's how we did everything we know how to do. I wonder if that kind of process radically changes once you've got someone who can transcribe that into an LLM, and then it sends it out to folks, and everybody works with the LLM to say, yeah, but did you try this? And then all of those notes come back. So instead of having the big kind of time-consuming conference, so I think healthcare is probably a big one.
Yeah.
Coding seemed pretty natural for it. I'm hoping that we are surprised this year. So in 2026, I'm hoping we're surprised that somebody finds a use and says like, oh my God, this whole industry could be different in a good way that we just hadn't thought about. But, if there's anything out there that is, you have to generate fairly structured information routinely that has to be trusted and verified, which is what code is. What is that industry? It's certainly not writing fiction. It's not writing movies, but legal documents seems to, they need to look a certain way. You have to be intelligent about what goes in and how it works around. So I think that's why I tend towards the legal profession being one that, even if it's not as prominent in its upheaval, is going to really, really change.
It seems like math research might be on the verge of transforming them. I am not a mathematician. I want to say that very clearly.
Get that out
for
of the
any
way.
of our listeners. I am not a mathematician. So
yeah,
it
anything that
seems
has
like
huge
there's
amounts
some
of permutations.
Mhm.
yeah, and like it seems like there's some interesting progress being made on harnesses for verifying proofs and whatnot. I would have to go read a lot more to understand what's going on. But
I
I'm
agree.
super interested what happens there.
It's a very
Yeah.
structured process, like, what works
Yeah.
with proof, claims that have to be made, and you go through it. I start thinking maybe it's not going to do that much original work. And I think this is where I sometimes started getting a little annoyed, having an absolute bias, totally admit the bias of having been in academia and only in the social sciences, so not even the hard sciences. But when people start getting on there and they start talking about it's going to cure cancer in a couple of years and it's going to solve all of these things, it's like, what's going to cure cancer is hundreds of people in labs with pipettes running these things and these tests and these human subjects over and over and over and over again to be confident. Now, the LLM might be unbelievably good at suggesting new permutations of drugs or permutations of treatments or ways to formulate, like you said, compounds, or ways to think about what's going on inside the structure of a cell. Fantastic. That's not going to cure cancer. Like, people are going to cure cancer. This just happens to be possibly a fantastic way to help them do it faster.
Yeah. Right. And I think that is a theme across the board, that I think people are scared it's going to be a replacement.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, it's like an accelerant. It's like it's almost like a drug that everyone gets to take, and it helps everybody just do that
limitless
much
drug
that
that Bradley Cooper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, like back to your point earlier, Ian, about defining like specific processes. I made a similar point the other day, or not the other day, but a couple episodes ago. The best way to use AI is to sit down and think about a thought process or a work process, like a specific process that you have that you don't want to perform every single time, and automate that. Free up your mind to think about cooler things. Drug combinations instead of to go back, like I'm sure that this analogy is terrible, but go back to the drug combinations and cancer therapy development, like spend more time on thinking of ways to get your medicine to people who need it. I don't know,
Yep. The law of what you put in is what you get out, right? Like we hear that all the time. You put in effort, you get out what you put in. And what comes to mind as I think about that with AI is it's like a lever, right? And it's like the lever has just gotten longer. So it's like if you're not putting in effort, you're going to get slop. That's what we're seeing.
This is Archimedes way out on the other end of that lever, being like, I can move the world if you can find me the appropriate, the longest lever. And you're absolutely right. And it's a huge lever. I don't want to be a Pollyanna. This is going to disrupt some industries. People are going to be, if not replaced, then not hired, as companies figure out that they can do more with the people that they've got.
Right.
And that is going to take some serious effort for us to wrestle with and to understand, for hopefully to deal with. So there is disruption coming. I don't foresee, I've forgotten who it was, Demesis Sabas or somebody who was like, look, this is going to take 80% of white collar jobs in the next 5 years. That's somebody that has, investors to placate and has to make news in order to keep selling $20 a month subscriptions. That is not all that's going to happen. There will be short-term, maybe even medium-term upheaval, but this is an amazing technology that is something that I think everybody should lean in and try. Like, you should absolutely try it and know what it doesn't do well in your area. And if it doesn't do well for a lot of reasons, then at the very least, you can have a great conversation with somebody who comes in and says, look, I'm just going to have AI do this. It's like, I've tried it. It's missing these 4 things. It's not going to get this right. Or, look, it does great when somebody with expertise can push it and give it the framework to say, this is how to think about the problem, the processes again, Spencer, and this is how to work with what I'm giving you so that I get something out that I can then work on, that it's not going to have the
Yep.
problems of just opening up Claude and being like, hey, design me a new style of house that's greener than before. And, being like, oh, look, I've just solved climate change.
Yeah.
Claude,
Yeah.
give me a warm hug.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious what is next for you, Ian. Like we've talked about
Next
all these
for me.
things. Fierce Highways, you've got Qloo, you've got so much going on. Obviously AI itself, like who knows in the next 6 months what
Yeah, mostly what I had to
could
do is
happen.
catch up on the last hour of news, which I'm sure has just completely
Yeah.
reset everything
Maybe
I
there's
was
a new
doing
model. Who
before.
knows?
Yeah.
Totally wrong about everything now.
Qloo is doing incredibly well. I really want to see where we can take this, because we have this astounding knowledge graph and all of this data
Yeah,
as a way to help inform not just what companies are doing with recommendations and personalization, but I think it could be fascinating on a wider audience, giving it more access, making it more accessible inside of companies through things like LLMs. So,
Interesting.
if we have a strong MCP server and people can just open up whatever internal LLM their company's allowed to use and just be like, I'm trying to define a marketing campaign, or I'm really interested in creating a new product for people in this area. What are the major cities that should think about that? Or I want to open up a new branch of my company, or I'm looking to, expand in other places, and getting that kind of feedback right from the LLM, but having it be grounded in data that is what we've created. For Fierce Highways, I just want more people to reach out and have conversations. I love talking about this stuff. It's been great chatting with you guys about this. This is what I do constantly, and I love to do it. And if I can inspire anybody to come to me and say, I've been thinking about this, I don't know if it'll work, or I'm pretty sure it'll work, but I don't know the first place to get started.
Yep.
I love that kind of project. I love being there, because what I want to deliver is something into your hands. I want you to be able to look at a screen or a phone and say, this is what I was thinking about. And now it does it. Not just say, oh, I'll, charge you $600 an hour and we'll talk about all the strategy and use the word alignment 48 times in an hour.
And generative and agentic.
And generative, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a hallucination. I've got to bring up hallucinations at least 20 times.
Exactly. Wow. Well, I'm excited. I mean, if any listeners want to reach out, say they're working on a project, their company is, whatever it is, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, Ian P. Cook. So it's like LinkedIn/in/Ian P. Cook. Fierce Highways, plural, .ai is easiest to just find a web presence for me. It's very bare bones. I've been lucky enough that I get a lot of the work that I do through word of mouth and other kind of intake. So I haven't had to build out a huge presence, but it's all there, and more than happy to chat with anybody that wants to. But hopefully they have enjoyed listening to it, and I make some appearances on podcasts, so search for my name and get to hear me chat about this all over the place.
I'll be doing that.
Yeah,
probably in 20 minutes.
All right.
Awesome. Well, Ian, we'll definitely drop links to your website, your profile, everything like that. Thank you for coming on. We'll definitely stay in contact.
Yeah, appreciate it, gentlemen. It's been so much fun. All the best, and Happy New Year, and hope you don't get totally rolled over like I'm going to with all the changes coming.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do. Thanks, Ian.